Audio Jungle.
All right. Well, thanks for coming back. I didn't scare you off the first time. This presentation, shorter, 30 minutes of time up here, and largely based on the fact that for the last 2 years, until I joined the investment bank that I now represent, I built an analytics and consulting practice for a recruiting agency. And so I lived and breathed recruiting, talent attraction, hiring, and retention for 2.5 years. I saw firsthand what works and what doesn't. And that's really what this is designed to teach you, is to give you some low-hanging fruit about things that I think you can implement right away that will make a difference in the talent landscape. So you saw the title of the presentation. I'm going to look at the 3 pillars of what I describe as a talent strategy, and that's how do you attract people to your organization? How do you effectively get them through the hiring process? And then most importantly, how do you retain the folks that you have? And at the end, as again I did the first time, some specific points for you to consider implementing. So can't get away from the data, not as much of it this time as last time, but a few slides to set the foundation for the conversation. This is the latest information on the labor market. It's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows that in the month of April, which is the last data point that we have available, the US economy added 175,000 jobs. The unemployment rate ticked up from 3.8 to 3.9%, and average hourly earnings, that I alluded to this in my last presentation, were also at 3.9%, nearly 4% year over year. So let's break this down a little bit. First and foremost, the actual job gain number. You have to understand the labor market has gone through a transformation unlike anything that we've seen in recent history, probably not since World War II, just in the last 4 or 5 years post-pandemic. Pre-COVID, it was considered an absolutely smashing jobs report if we added 175,000 jobs. It reflected full employment, it reflected a vibrant economy, it was all good things regarding the labor market. This 175,000 is actually down from the average of about 350,000 jobs that we were adding every single month since we opened the economy post-COVID. So it represents a slowing and a coming back to more normal pace for labor market additions in this country. In 2023, we added 3 million jobs for the year as a whole. And just like last month, the bulk of that was concentrated in just 3 industries: government, leisure and hospitality, and healthcare. And so it's no wonder why people have very different experiences regarding finding jobs, losing jobs, because it's really at the vertical market, at the industry level. Yes, overall the labor market is doing really well, but that positivity is concentrated in just those 3 areas, primarily focused on frontline workers. The unemployment rate still very healthy at 3.9%. Actually, more people entered the labor market in the month of April, which is why it ticked up. So it means the total pool of available talent grew a little bit, which is good news for you. It should be a little bit easier now to find people to fill your job openings and a little bit easier to retain the folks that you have. I'll show you some data on that. The average hourly earnings, I think, is an important metric for you to focus on, because as long as that number is elevated, the days of 2% COLA, or cost of living adjustment increases, are firmly in our rearview mirror. In order for your folks to feel like they're not losing ground, you're looking at 4 to 5% pay increase just based on the pace of inflation and on the cost of living rise. Otherwise, they're definitely going to start looking elsewhere because they feel like they're falling behind. So all of these are points of reference for you. That 3.9% unemployment rate is true at the overall level, but it really differs when you look at the different kinds of positions. So in particular, management. Look at the unemployment rate for management, 2.3%. That means if you're trying to hire a manager to run your operation, it's much more difficult to find that person than it is to find someone who is, more frontline oriented, because the demand from managers still very much exceeds the supply of good people-oriented management professionals. The same thing on the business side of your organization. Accountants in particular are very short in supply right now. People are just not getting enough accounting degrees. You can see 2.2% unemployment rate there. So the main message here is the devil is in the details. Look beyond the headline figures and understand what are the specific drivers affecting the positions that you're trying to hire for today, and then make decisions accordingly, okay? This is a very encouraging chart. So you have two lines here. The orange line is showing you the number of unemployed actively seeking work right now over time. The dark blue line is the number of job openings in this country. So what you'll notice is there's a compression that's been happening over the last 2 years since early 2022. The number of job openings has fallen from 12 million at the peak in early 2022 to about 8.5 million today. And the number of unemployed has basically stayed relatively stable at about 6.5 million people. But it's that gap that's important. So in 2022, there were 7 million more job openings than there were people looking for work. Today, that number is closer to 2 million. So that shows that the tightness, the constraints in the labor market today are a little bit less profound, and it should be easier for you to fill the positions that you're trying to fill. But you'll also notice that there's still a ton of open jobs available. You look at, for example, that leisure and hospitality sector right now, 1.1 million job openings in the United States in that sector. So it's still very much a competitive labor market, just not as much so as it was 2 years ago. The pendulum, if you will, has swung from being all the way in the candidate side to more towards the middle. I'd still say it's 60-40 towards the candidate, but the employer now has a little bit more say relative to what was going on there. So it's encouraging. It's a positive momentum for you as someone who's trying to fill those positions and to run your business effectively from a cost basis perspective. This is the slide that shows you that retaining the folks that you have should also be a little bit easier. So this is the number of quits that happen in the United States at any given point in time. You'll notice that before the pandemic, the average was about 2.5 million people quitting their jobs every year. During that surge in 2021, 2022, we were up at 4.5 million. So nearly double the rate of quits happening. That was the Great Resignation, as I'm sure you've heard about it called. I'm officially here to tell you the Great Resignation is over. It is behind us. We are now in a more stable, more consistent, and more favorable dynamic when it comes to people quitting their jobs. You can see that the current level on the far right, where the star is basically back on the same volume as what we had in 2018, 2019, leading into COVID. So we're back in that normal territory. So that means that it should be a little bit easier for you to retain the folks that you have, because the prospects of switching jobs and going somewhere else, even if they make a little bit more money, is not as appealing to people because they value stability and consistency, and they're willing to take a little bit less money in order to provide that, because they know if they're the highest paid person at their new organization, they're going to be the first on the chopping block should things turn south. So I think from both elements of attracting people to your company and retaining the folks that you have, you will have an easier time of it in 2024 and as we move into 2025 relative to what you've been experiencing over the last few years. That's the good news. So I titled the presentation, Building an Effective Talent Strategy. What do I mean when I say a talent strategy? I mean the course of action that involves the senior decision makers of a company, including the owner, the executive suites, all the way to the top. Because at the end of the day, it is not the HR department that should set that strategy, because the HR department doesn't control the resources that you have to deploy in order to address any shortcomings in the business that may exist. You, as the decision makers, the ones that control the budget, that can effectively tell people where to spend their time, focus, and energy, have to be a part of that conversation. So recently, we had a database at that recruiting company of about 20,000 customers that we've served over the last 40 years. And I asked them, I said, which of your organizations has a comprehensive, purposeful talent strategy? And you can see here the results. So 27% said, yes, absolutely. Who does not have one of those these days? But 73% of the responders said, no, we don't have one. Now, the silver lining to that cloud is that most of them are working on it. They are aware that this is an area that they need to improve in. But I feel genuinely sad for the companies at the bottom of that response, the 9% of firms that said, no, this is the way that we've always done it. We're going to continue to do it the way that we have, regardless of what's happening in the marketplace around us, because I literally saw them falling behind. They couldn't attract people. They couldn't keep the people that they had. And they were wondering, why are we losing this battle for talent? Well, it's because you're not strategic about it. So I'm curious, if you were to think about your own organization and to apply this definition of talent strategy, including all the way at the top, how many of you feel like you have your own effective talent strategy? Raise your hand. See one hand there, 2, 3, a few hands. Okay, this is very typical of all the organizations I speak in front of, and I do this 100 times a year, including last week at the car wash show, where I saw a very similar response. So the idea here is not to make you feel bad about yourself, but let this be a call to action. This is an area that needs more attention from you in the business, including giving a seat at the table, at the decision-making table to the HR folks, making sure that there's a constant flow of information between you and them, and giving them input and listening to them in terms of when you go to set your revenue goals, your profitability targets, your hiring plans, they have to be involved in that conversation, but so do you as the leadership. So let this be a call to action for you that you need to pay attention in this space and devote some time, energy, and resources to building and then continuously refining that talent strategy as the market evolves around you. All right, a few low-hanging fruit that I wanted to make you aware of in terms of what can you do. So in attracting the right talent to your organization, you're effectively asking the question, why would somebody want to come and work for me? And in order to answer that question, you have to understand different motivating factors affect different people in different ways. So there are two concepts that I wanted to share with you here. First, it's the idea of the elevator pitch. So historically, if you find yourself in an elevator with a CEO or an owner of a business that you want to work for, you have about a minute, maybe 2 minutes to give an effective pitch to get them to hire you, why they should hire you for their company. That idea has been flipped on its head. It is now the company's responsibility to take an eloquent, effective message to the marketplace, specifically to candidates, why they should come and work for them. The way that you build this message needs to focus around these 4 core areas: the market, the product, the team, and the mission. A little bit more detail here into each one. What I mean by the market is you've got to sell the idea that your industry is a sexy one. And the videos that we saw earlier do exactly that. You're driven by technology. You're implementing all of these new ideas and processes. It is not a boring and mature and dirty industry the way that most young people probably think about laundry today. So the notion is include in the message what makes laundry a sexy industry that somebody wants to build a career in. The second element, product, is what makes you and your products and services different from everybody else in this industry. Why do you position them to win by coming to work for you? Because your approach to serving the market is different and hopefully strategically advantageous relative to your competitors. The third element, team, is probably the most overlooked one in the entire conversation. Why? Because psychologically, we as humans are attracted to success. And yet most companies, when they talk to people about their business, do not highlight the amazing team of individuals that this person will be joining if they come to work for you. These people that have hit the objectives, exceeded goals, achieved great things. We want to be attracted to success. We gravitate towards success. So highlight the folks that they're going to be joining because it makes them all the more likely to want to be a part of that team. And then lastly, mission. This is especially key for the younger generations. What is it about your business that goes beyond making money? What community engagement do you do? What philanthropic causes do you support? How do you give back? What is it that you do that makes lives better for people, right? Make them easier, less mundane day to day. So if you can take these 4 elements and craft an effective message, use your marketing department. You really have to think about talent attraction as a sales and marketing feature within your organization. Take the message to all the typical channels, but also spread it through word-of-mouth advertising amongst all of your employees, not just the management, but all the way to the frontline worker. If you can do that, that gives you a substantial leg up against companies that do not do that. You will attract more folks to apply for the positions that you're advertising. The flip side of this coin is understanding that different people are motivated by different things. So one of the great tools that I saw implemented very effectively at the recruiting practice is something called CLAMPS. CLAMPS is an acronym that stands for Challenge, Location, Advancement, Money, People, and Security. And all this is a 6-line questionnaire that is sent to every candidate that puts in an application to ask them, rank these things in order of priority to you. And then that information, once it's received, is fed back to the hiring authority, to the person conducting the interview, and they see what the individual cares the most about. For example, salespeople, not surprisingly, will care about money first and foremost. We discovered that engineers care about the challenge of the work more. They're willing to take slightly less money to work on cool projects. People in early stages of their careers care about the team of individuals they're joining, so the people component, and the advancement opportunities. Whereas people in mid to late stages care more about the location, meaning remote work possibility, flexibility of schedule, work from home arrangements, and the job security. So understand that if you get what that person cares about, and you're able to then use that input to tailor the conversation to hit on the points that they care about, they're going to be much more likely to accept a job offer than if you just have the same rigmarole conversation that you have right now in your hiring process, asking the same mundane questions and going through the same exact approach no matter who's sitting in front of you. So cheap, basically costs no money to implement, very little time commitment, but hugely effective in terms of actually getting people to think, wow, this company and I are aligned in terms of what we care about. I want to work here. So again, think about implementing that. Shifting gears to the hiring process, you have to understand that there's 2 distinct types of clients, employees, candidates. There's the active ones that are constantly responding to your job postings, whether it's online, in print, through your website. But then there's the passive candidate. And most organizations do not supplement their looking for talent on the active side by trying to go after the passive candidate. The passive candidate, so active on the first hand is the 6.5 million people that are unemployed today. They're proactively searching for work. They've set up a bunch of job alerts online, and anything that comes back that even remotely smells like it matches, they're applying for. I call it the shotgun approach because they're sending out resumes into the void, expecting in 99% of the cases that they're never going to hear anything back. You can't get away from going after those people, but you can supplement it by going after the passive candidates. These are the folks that are on cruise control at their current job. They don't love it. They don't hate it. They're fine. They are not searching for work, but they're open to the idea of a new job. And the difference here is that as they casually browse, whether it's LinkedIn or in the case of blue-collar frontline workers, Craigslist increasingly is a place that they search for work. They're not going to actually take that step of applying unless they're personally engaged by someone to do that. So you can do this in one of two different ways. You can have your HR folks become internal recruiters and pay them a set of salary and benefits, or you can go outside of the company and pay a third-party recruiter to go after whether it's contract workers on the blue-collar side or full-time positions on the white-collar side that you're trying to fill. Yes, there is a cost to do so, but the efficacy of that process, the outcome in the passive side is so much better that it's oftentimes very, very worth the investment. So what do I mean by that? On average, it takes 11 interviews to fill a position with a candidate who is actively searching for work because you have to go through a lot of different candidates. On average, it takes 4 to fill one with a passive candidate because they're targeted, that you know that they're a good fit because you've done the research on them. And then when they come in, if you're able to implement that clamps mentality, they're much more likely to say yes to the job. So you can see it's a 70% improvement in the efficacy and the throughput. And so it's worth spending a little bit of resources to gain that kind of outcome. Okay? So understanding the difference between active and passive talent is really important in terms of driving those applications in. The other key element that I want to highlight for you on the hiring side is you have to be efficient. You have to compress the process. I still talk to a lot of businesses that have this outdated notion that the more rounds of interviews that they can put someone through, the better that person feels about themselves, right? Like this notion that, oh, they made it to round 5, they must feel really good, right? It's so outdated. It doesn't apply anymore. You can see this is another survey, but this time I asked all of the candidates. And we had over 100,000 candidates in our database that I asked this. You can see I said, how many interviews should it take before a company really clearly shows you that they're interested in hiring you on full-time or part-time or whatever it is that you're applying for? And you can see most of the candidates, 83%, said it should not take more than 2 interviews. And let's be realistic here, ladies and gentlemen. You know, as someone who has probably conducted an interview or 2 in your career, you know in the first 5 or 10 minutes whether or not this person is going to get the yes or the no, right? So why draw out the process? Compress, more efficient. If you want them to talk to multiple people in the organization, get all of those people in the same room. Or do it over a Teams or a Zoom call as a lead-in into the conversation. These are all very effective things that you can do to streamline the process. So if you're still doing more than 2, ask yourself why, and look to change that dynamic. I will also say that communication is absolutely vital to this process. If you have not had a touch point with a candidate in the last 5 days, meaning an email, a voicemail, a phone call, a LinkedIn message, some sort of notification that you're still thinking of them, that they're not drifting, they're going to be turning their attention somewhere else. You're going to be seeing less interest from that candidate. So communicate effectively. Even if your process is taking you a little bit longer, make sure you're letting them know that they're still very much in consideration for the role. At the end of the day, you know how much I love data, but you cannot improve what you don't measure. And so hiring metrics like this or retention metrics, you should all have access to this. This is not mysterious information. But I'll bet if I were to ask the question, raise your hand if you know your organization's offer to acceptance rate. You cannot tell me. Who can tell me what their offer to acceptance rate is? Okay. But you should know this. Your HR department has the data. You should know whether it's staying flat or improving or declining over time because you know where to deploy resources. Identify the areas where you need to invest time, energy, and money to get better about something. So it can be any of these metrics. Your HR person simply has to have clear expectations that they will track this and communicate it to you as senior management on a regular, ongoing basis so that you can use that data to make better quality decisions about where to deploy those resources. The last element is retention, and here there's one very clear message. Pre-pandemic, the #1 reason why people left organizations was because of their immediate manager. There was conflict, there was drama, their relationship was not good. It was very difficult to bounce back from that, no matter what you did. Today, and really since the start of the reopening of the economy post-pandemic, it is by far compensation and benefits is the #1 reason that people leave organizations. So you've got to be very data-driven in this part of your business. And what I mean by that is you got to understand what are the competitive wages today for the positions that you already have and that you're trying to fill. And there are ample sources of data available. Here's an example. This data is from ADP, one of the top-tier payroll providers. They're showing the difference between the job stayers at the bottom, that's the light blue line, and the purple line are the people that are switching jobs. So what they're saying is, on average, job stayers through the month of April 2024 are seeing a wage increase of 5%, but those that are switching jobs are seeing an increase of 9.3%. Understanding where the market is regarding compensation is super powerful information that you need to have access to at all times. Here's another example. This is a much more detail-oriented data set. This is from a company called Labor IQ, which is a third-party provider that I have bought into as part of the consulting work that I do. But it goes to amazing granularity. So this is for a car wash manager. I didn't have time to update this for the Laundry Association, but I think you'll see the relevancy here. It says, in the location of Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, for someone with 6 to 8 years of experience and a high school diploma, working specifically in car washes, that's the vertical market that this is alluding to, for a business with between 1 and 19 employees making between 5 and 10 million in revenue every year, the average salary for that person is about $35,000, regardless of experience or education. But the competitive rate, the recommended salary that you have to pay that person based on the significant shortage of these types of candidates in the marketplace today is about $41K. So it's about 15 to 20% premium to attract this particular person in this location to this company in this industry. That's the level of detail that I encourage all business owners to pursue. You're not always going to be able to achieve it, but at least strive for that in order to understand what does compensation look like from a competitive dynamics perspective. Okay? And if you want help with this, I'm certainly happy to do so. Please reach out to me after the fact. Understand that I'm not advocating here for you to be paying the highest compensation possible, whether it's in your industry or across the blue-collar landscape. You have other levers to pull as well. Salary is certainly one of them, but one-time bonuses, long-term incentives, flexible working arrangements. One of the most successful practices that I've observed lately is giving people a few additional days of off-the-book PTO. Don't change your PTO policy, but make sure that you communicate very clearly. Yes, we're going to give you 3 to 5 days of extra PTO per year. This is not part of your normal allotment. Make sure you arrange this in advance with your manager so that your responsibilities are covered, and then take that Friday off. The amount of goodwill that you earn with people is so much greater than the cost of doing that. And it doesn't commit you to that policy long term. So lots of positive ways for you to engage with your employees and to get the point across that, look, we're willing to listen to you and work with you. We're willing to be flexible, right? So the whole notion here is the traditional dynamic in the labor market is I'm the boss, you're the employee, and I'm going to project power down. I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. This is not working anymore. What you want is a partnership. I, as a company, will tell you what I need from you as an employee to get my goals and objectives met. But I'm also willing to listen to you as an employee to what you need from me. And whenever possible, I will do my best to give you those things. Now, it's not going to be 100%, but I'm at least willing to listen and to respond. So when you have a partnership dynamic like this, rather than the traditional power down, it is so much stickier. Retention goes through the roof when people feel like you actually care and want to give them the things that they're asking for. So very, very powerful stuff indeed. I'm not going to harp on this. There are retention metrics that you should be tracking over time if you're not already doing so. And again, these slides will be readily available to you, so don't feel compelled to take pictures, but it'll give you some ideas about things that you can implement right away. All right, I promised you key takeaways. First and foremost, understand that a comprehensive talent strategy is not live in the HR department. It lives with you as the business leader and the key decision maker. You've got to be data-driven in those decisions. And so whether it's the clamps understanding of what motivates people or salary stuff or the hiring and retention metrics, let the data be your guide in terms of making those critical business decisions. Find partners and allies to pursue some of those prospects in the passive market if you're struggling to fill positions with the active candidates. And then on each of the pillars, very simple. For attractiveness, it's communicate the why somebody wants to work with you. Use sales and marketing as a vehicle of getting your message to the market, and understand candidate priorities. On hiring, strive for efficiency and top-notch communication in the process. Again, those touch points are really, really important. And then on the retention, right now, competitive pay is absolutely the key, but it doesn't just stop there. You want to ask your people for input, listen to what they tell you. Don't just have a little basketball hoop over your trash can, as a feedback mechanism. And then, whenever possible, try to accommodate their requests, as long as they're reasonable. If you're able to do these things, then you will achieve a much better momentum towards that effective talent strategy for your organization. All right. Thanks for your attention for 30 minutes. So at this point, I'll call the panel members up. And again, guys, thank you. You've been a pleasure today. Appreciate it.